The engine of the 1996 Ford F-150 gave one final growl before going silent, leaving behind an awkward stillness amid a row of Bentleys and Rolls-Royces glistening in the sunlight. Elara, Lara Vance, stepped out of the truck. Gravel crunched under the soles of her worn Red Wing boots each step, leaving a trail of fine dust on the mirror-clean concrete. Her olive M65 field jacket, faded with time, brushed against her arm as she lifted a wooden rifle case from the truck bed. The handle was worn smooth, the brass latches scratched, but it had been meticulously polished. This wasn't an antique, it was a relic. Not far away, a Tesla Model S Plaid was silently charging. No sound, just a shimmer of heat rising from its hood. A stark contrast to the sound of Lara's door slamming shut, sharp, deliberate. Before her stood the Elara Precision Club, not a shooting range, but a fortress of glass, titanium, and mahogany. Towering glass doors, matte steel frames, a gleaming brass emblem like the crest of an ancient bloodline. The air here wasn't welcome. It warned. Lara paused, eyes scanning the structure as if assessing a target. Bulletproof glass. Hidden camera system, only one entrance. Guard at the door, no cover. If something went wrong, this was the worst place to make a mistake. One step forward. The glass door opened, only to be blocked by a man in a black suit. He stood like a monolith, back straight, hands clasped behind him, wearing a wireless earpiece. He didn't ask, "Can I help you?" He stated flat and firm, "Ma'am, this is a members-only facility." Lara said nothing. From her jacket pocket, she pulled out a lightly scratched metal card and placed it in his hand. He pinched it delicately between two fingernails, like it was a foreign object, and fed it into the scanner. Beep. The screen blinked. Authorized. Guest of Jenner Hargrove Rhett. His brow furrowed. General Hargrove. His voice dropped, uncertain. Lara met his eyes. "He was a friend of my father's." A pause. Then reluctantly, he stepped aside and opened the door like a robot obeying a command it didn't want to process. "This way, ma'am." Lara entered without looking back, but she clearly heard the muttered words behind her. There must be some mistake. She didn't smile, just gripped the rifle case tighter. "There's no mistake. I'm here to make you remember my name and my father's." The air inside the Elara Precision Club was thick with the scent of cedarwood, fine leather, and something harder to describe: privilege. High ceilings, soft amber lights poured down onto walnut floors, polished to a mirror sheen. Dark burgundy Chesterfield chairs, oil paintings lined the walls. Nothing here was random. Every detail declared one thing: this place was not for the many. But the most intimidating thing wasn't the decor, it was the silence. No chatter, only refined sounds. The clink of ice in a glass of Macallan 25, the slow rustle of a turned Wall Street Journal page, the whisper of million-dollar deals sealed with the faintest nod. Lara stepped in an olive-green disruption to a classical oil painting. Her frayed shoulder M65 jacket, faded jeans, and dust-covered boots stood apart from everything around her. No one greeted her, but every eye turned. At the center of the lounge sat Sterling Thorne. He didn't need to lift his head to know Lara had arrived. He reclined slightly, one leg crossed, holding a glass of whiskey without drinking. His charcoal gray suit was tailored to perfection, the cuff just revealing a glimpse of a Patek Philippe Nautilus, a watch no one buys, only receives by invitation. His platinum blonde hair was slicked back with military precision. Around him lounged the heirs sons of CEOs, senators, retired generals. They weren't loud. They smiled with their eyes and nodded in code. A secret society where everyone knew their place, and Lara had no place in it. Sterling glanced her way, lips twitching, not quite a smile. Then he leaned toward the man beside him and murmured just loud enough, "I didn't realize Ethelgard had started a charity program for the underprivileged." No one burst out laughing, but the smirks spread like a virus. Lara's face didn't change. She didn't speed up, didn't look around. She walked along the wall, chose a corner near the shooting range, and set down the rifle case like a sacred object. She sat. Her eyes didn't rise to meet those mocking her. They measured wind, humidity, and light. Her hand rested briefly on the wooden stock, one touch short and familiar, like greeting an old companion. She wasn't here to play their games. She was here to end a war. Lara stood and walked toward the test firing area. No one called her. No one invited her. But her gaze was already drawn to the LED board on the wall, the one displaying Julian Croft's record. His name stood out like a luxury brand. Julian Croft, 109X, current champion just across the range. The man himself was assembling a Blazer R8 Carbon Success, a mechanical masterpiece worth over 20 grand. No one made a scene, but it was clear that everything around him gave him space. Not out of fear, out of respect. Julian wasn't handsome in a movie star way. He had an athletic build, a clean buzz cut, and a plain polo shirt. His hands moved fast, precise, not a single wasted motion. Every action looked like it had been repeated 1,000 times. His whole body projected a signal, "I don't guess. I know what I'm doing." Lara looked at him. Julian glanced back. No smile, no mockery. But his eyes paused on the wooden rifle case she carried. And in that look, neither angry nor dismissive, there was only one thing: technical doubt, like a Michelin-starred chef watching someone walk into his kitchen with a dented aluminum pot. Then Sterling Thorne spoke, softly, sweet like honey in a mousetrap. "Miss Vance, isn't it?" He strolled over, hands in his pockets, smile, nearly polite. "I've heard your father was quite the marksman. An inventor with some rather interesting ideas." Lara held his gaze, but didn't reply. Sterling nodded, as if they were reminiscing about something fond. Then he turned to Julian. "Mr. Croft, here is our reigning champion. He's held the record for nearly a year now. Almost perfect." He turned back to Lara. "We're all quite curious about your father's legacy. Perhaps you could demonstrate just a quick performance, a tribute, if you will." No one forced her, no microphone, no cheering crowd. But the pressure hung in the air like lead. A refusal now would be the same as saying, "I'm afraid." And she knew that. All too well. He was using her father against her. If she declined, he would laugh in the face of her father's life's work. If she failed, he'd tear it apart and turn it into some bargain bin product licensed under Thorne Defense. Lara looked at him one last time, then turned to Julian, who still stood silent, not interfering. She nodded. One round. Then she turned away, saying nothing more. But in Sterling's eyes, a spark of triumph flared. The trap had closed. Lara stepped into lane 7. No one told her to choose that one. But she knew it was the farthest from the crowd, flanked by glass partitions with less wind interference. Her father used to say, "Pick the spot, no one's watching. Then make them unable to look away." She set the wooden case on the bench. The latch clicked open with a heavy snap. The scent of aged wood and gun oil rose up, pulling her back to that tiny workshop behind the house, the tin roof shed that turned into an oven during the summer. Her father, Sergeant David Vance, in a sweat-stained tank top, arms covered in grease, hunched over a workbench, welding tiny parts together. "Don't fear the metal," he'd say. "It only reflects the hands that wield it." She lifted the Remington 700 from its case. Not quickly, not carelessly, Her fingers glided along the wooden stock across the worn metal where her father's cheek used to rest. She saw the scratches, the patches rubbed smooth by sweat and time. She saw pieces of him in every detail. The rifle wasn't pretty, but it was alive. What made it different was inside the Vance inertial trigger, a firing mechanism her father had spent the last 10 years of his life designing. It responded to the acceleration of a fingertip, virtually eliminating human error in trigger pull. He believed it could change everything, but cancer took him before he could ever prove it. Thorn Defense knew that, knew it well, and they were waiting for the patent to expire. Once that happened, if no one could demonstrate its effectiveness, they'd declare not viable, then they'd replicate it, slap their brand on it, and never mention the name Vance. She remembered the final night by his hospital bed, his hand gripping hers, eyes red and glassy from the meds. Don't let them steal it, baby girl. Show the world it works. Lara chambered a single round, each click closing the bolt, adjusting the scope. Setting the rifle on the rest echoed like a heartbeat tightening in her chest. Beyond the glass wall, the murmurs started. Looks like a real antique, someone whispered. Probably scratches the damn floor, another chuckled. Lara didn't hear. Or more precisely, she chose not to. She placed her cheek against the stock. Perfect alignment, not a hair off. She inhaled, held her breath. This wasn't about pride. It wasn't about ego. It was about a promise. Lara tightened her finger around the trigger, inhaled, held her breath. Her eye locked onto the bullseye at 300 feet, a dot, no larger than a tack, hovering in the blurred haze of her scope. She exhaled slowly. Her finger moved, not pulling, but releasing at the precise moment. Shot one. Click. Boom. The sharp crack echoed through the VIP section, slicing the silence clean in two. On the screen behind the target, a number lit up 10.0, a few small scoffs. Sterling Thorn didn't bother turning around. He lifted his whiskey glass and gave it a light swirl. Lucky shot, he said, his voice low and flat. Lara didn't respond. She chambered the next round. Every motion still exact smooth, like she'd been doing this since she was 3. Shot 2, inhale, exhale, click, boom. The screen lit up again, 10.0. This time the laughter slowed. An older man in a grey suit furrowed his brow and lowered his newspaper. A young woman in a black blazer paused her phone call and turned her head toward lane 7. Lara still looked at no one. She loaded the third round. Her hands are steady, breathing machine-like. Shot 3, inhale, exhale, click, boom, 10.0. A brief silence, then no way. The voice didn't come from the crowd. It came from the adjacent lane. Julian Croft. He had lowered his Blazer R8, no longer watching his own target. His eyes were locked on Lara. He saw what the others were still missing. The unmoving stance, the vanishing heart rate, the absence of any excess motion. This wasn't amateur skill. This was micro-level control, seen only in the world's elite marksmen or in those obsessively dangerously driven. Julian stepped back as if reassessing the entire battlefield. Behind the glass wall, the crowd still didn't know what to do with this feeling. No one laughed anymore. No one spoke. Just the hum of ventilation fans and the soft flicker of the scoreboard. Lara aimed again. She didn't smile. She wasn't smug. Only her eyes were sharp, focused, and utterly still. They were starting to notice. And that was when the real game began. Shot 4, inhale, exhale, click, boom, 10.0. No more whispers, no more clinking ice, no more rustling pages. The air had been sucked out of the VIP lounge as if someone had just sealed a coffin shut. Shot 5, inhale, exhale, click, boom, 10.0. Julian Croft stood fully upright, arms hanging by his sides. He was no longer a reigning champion observing an amateur display. He was a witness. And the look in his eyes wasn't envy, it was respect. Shot 6, inhale, exhale, click, boom. 10.0. Sterling Thorne gripped his glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. He was no longer lounging, no longer smirking. He stared at the screen like he could will it to glitch. Shot 7. Inhale, exhale, click, boom. 10.0. An aging investor seated at the back leaned down and pulled out his phone. Not to take a picture, but to call his tech analysis team. Shot 8. Inhale, exhale, click, boom. 10.0. The sound in the room was no longer noise or silence. It was collective breath-holding. No one dared move, as if one wrong twitch might throw Lara off. Shot 9. Inhale, exhale, click, boom. 10.0. 9 rounds, 9 perfect shots. The scoreboard flickered like a heart racing out of rhythm. No one had ever seen this in Ethelgard's history. Final shot. Shot 10. Lara loaded the last round into the chamber. She didn't fire immediately. She aimed. Then closed her eyes. For one brief second, she wasn't in this elite club. She was back in that sweltering workshop where her father once rested a hand on her shoulder and said, "It's not the rifle, Lara. It's the silence between your heartbeat and your fingertip." She opened her eyes. Everything around her faded. No people, no sound, only the bullseye. Inhale, exhale, click, boom. The screen froze for a second, then displayed 100, 10x. But something was strange. On the paper target, there weren't 10 bullet holes. There was only one. Its edge is slightly torn. The 9 rounds that followed had passed through the exact same spot, down to a fraction of a millimeter. A single chime rang out high, clear, unmistakable. New record. The VIP room stood paralyzed. Sterling didn't blink. Julian exhaled for the first time in 10 minutes. All of Ethelgard stopped breathing. Lara lowered the rifle. No unnecessary motion. She placed it back into the wooden case, turned the hinges, and closed it with a soft but decisive click. She turned around. Behind the glass, the crowd remained motionless. They had just witnessed something far beyond marksmanship. It was the pure precision of will. Julian Croft was the first to step forward. No applause, no handshake. He stopped a few feet away and looked her straight in the eye. "I've never seen anything like that," he said, voice low, genuine, free of performance. Then he glanced down at the wooden case. "That trigger system, may I take a look?" There was no smile in his eyes. Only one thing, recognition. From a champion to someone he now admitted had reached another tier entirely. Only then did Sterling Thorne approach. His face had gone pale, his eyes strained to appear composed, but the twitch in his jaw betrayed him. He was no longer the lion in the room. Lara didn't look at him with hatred, just with the calm of someone who had already seen this coming. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the heavy silence, each word rang like a nail driven home. "My father's system. It works. Nothing more." And that was when everything collapsed for Sterling Thorne. The words, so simple, fell like a curtain, like the final bell of a match, where everyone already knew who had won. A man behind one of the leather sofas, a seasoned investor in the defense sector, leaned toward his assistant. "Find out who her legal rep is. Now." Another man pulled out his phone, tapping rapidly, whispering as he dialed, "This tech is real. We just let it slip through our hands." The murmurs spread like crashing waves. But this time, it wasn't mockery. It was a calculation, consideration, invitations, money, power, opportunity. Julian remained still, a silent guarantor of her presence. He didn't need to say more. His eyes confirmed it. She belonged here and was already leading. Sterling, with nothing left to cling to, simply stood there, alone, while all the people who once laughed beside him now turned their backs. 1 month later, the front page of the Wall Street Journal ran a bold headline: Thorn Defense Stock Plummets After Vance Invention, Proven Valid. Beneath it was a grainy image from Ethelgard, the Remington 700, resting on its stand, the glowing scoreboard, reading 110x in the background, and a small caption: Unprecedented Record, set by Elara Vance. Top floor, 34th level of a glass tower overlooking downtown Los Angeles. Lara sat at the head of the conference table. Same old M65 field jacket, slightly wrinkled. Same neatly tied auburn hair. In front of her lay a thick contract bearing the logo of one of America's largest defense conglomerates, Thorn Defense's direct competitor. The number on the final page, over $200 million, not including intellectual property rights, legal protections, and independent product development authority. But Lara wasn't looking at the money. Her eyes stopped at one bolded line atop the contract: Technology Vance, Inertial Trigger, TM, owner Elara Vance. To her left sat Julian Croft, not a lover, not a savior, but her first technical partner. He had staked his reputation to verify her father's system, and now he did exactly what he promised, sat quietly letting her decide. The lead negotiator gave a courteous nod. Miss Vance, if you're ready, all that's left is your signature. Lara picked up the pen. Her fingertip trembled, not from fear, but from something stranger. She had entered Ethelgard as someone no one believed in, and now an entire industry waited for her name on the dotted line. She signed, ink dried on paper. Her name was printed clearly: Elara Vance. A second later, everyone in the room rose: handshakes, business cards, printers, humming contracts, copied phones, buzzing non-stop. But Lara simply stood, pulled out her phone, and opened an old photo of her father in uniform. He was smiling, hand resting on the Remington, and behind him a 10-year-old Lara hugging a rifle too big for her but refusing to let go. She stared at the photo for a long while, then slipped the phone into her pocket, her hand brushing the worn patch on her shoulder. No one noticed that moment. There were no fireworks, no televised interviews, but inside her a voice rang clear: "You did it, sweetheart. They heard you." The end. A journey born from a promise. A legacy preserved. A name no longer forgotten. Some people are not born to be welcomed. They walk into rooms where every eye doubts them, and one by one, those eyes are forced to look again. Elara Vance didn't win with money or power. She won because she kept a promise, because she refused to let silence bury the truth, and because she believed real value never needs to shout to be heard. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong somewhere, if you've ever walked into a room where everyone thought you weren't good enough, then remember this. Sometimes you don't need to change who you are to be accepted. You just need to be so good. They can't ignore you. If this story moved, you leave a like and share it with someone who needs a reason to believe. And don't forget to subscribe to Toch Story, because here we tell stories that don't need superpowers yet still change the world. One real person, one real journey, and a victory you'll never forget.